the PowerPoint. But at the end, I settled down that e-resources will put at the end, like most of the books are dealing with. So I have time, I will deal with e-resources in general. But e-resources are probably you are all done in the library school, so it may not necessarily, if I have time, I will go that path. And first of all, like my handout was, not handout, I mean the workbook document is like my note and not much descriptions. And again, this content of this presentation deals mainly with the collection development of Japanese studies, academic and research collection based on Japanese language material published in Japan in humanities and social sciences. The remarks are of a general nature and contents are concerned the basics of the acquisition of Japanese language materials. They are based on my professional experience. Each library has to adjust the details of its acquisition procedures to its own environment. Among others, this book, I get it through the interlibrary loan. Fundamentals of Collection Development and Management by Peggy Johnson, published by American Library Association 2004, was heavily consulted to prepare this presentation. Columbia doesn't have library school, so we don't have very good collection. So, but anyway, my agenda is following the document in the workbook. Hopefully this one will bring things. Okay, here is a better one. And well, first of all, I didn't put anything in for Japanese studies. The reason is, what should I put in the library for Japanese studies? Definition, and I couldn't think about it, so I left it blank. But then I had a chance to talk with some young junior librarians, and I was talked about what I did in Pittsburgh, so I decided to put those things. And now, first of all, Japanese studies is like in Canada, there's a Canadiana collection, which is by and about Canada. But for Japanese studies, it's not necessarily by. The reason, of course, by is included, but mainly about Japan, not necessarily by Japan, because if someone wrote about in Japanese, by Japanese authors, about Israel, that's not the Japanese studies, so we don't purchase those things. So basically, this is about Japan, and some of the library include from Japan, for example, other, like something written by Japanese and but Japanese librarian asked to purchase those things for other parts of the library. But basically, for Japanese studies, content is about Japan. That's my understanding. Okay. And for Japanese studies collection, I started, as I said, smaller library. The first thing I learned is to be a research collection, minimum 40,000 volumes are necessary. This one is published as part of Professor Hawaii has a presentation at the International Council of Japan, and she mentioned, I asked her who was the source, and she also took from someone else. So I couldn't quote the source, but anyway, so that's what I learned, 40,000 volumes. And based on my experiences, 40,000 may be a good size to start to be sort of generally sufficient to use a service at institution. And so my target first thing was to become a collection of 40,000 volumes for our studies. And then, when it becomes 40,000 volumes, mainly it's a vanilla collection. It's almost same as any other collections. Then think about local environment characteristics. In the case of Pittsburgh, I was thinking whether I should collect. Pittsburgh was iron city. It was well known for iron industry. So whether I should collect all these Japanese documents talking about iron industry, or like some characteristics I was thinking about it, but it's not really my head and really develop. Then eventually, Pittsburgh got offer for Mitsui collection, so-called Mitsui collection, which was Mitsui Bank's institution for finance and business. And so we acquired entire this special collection, which is about 60,000 volumes. And so that really gave character to Pittsburgh's collection. So it's sort of grow out of vanilla collection to a collection which has some special features. And well, this is just one model I came and went through. So when you are starting from small library, I started about 25,000 volumes, and out of those, about 30% was content in China, written in Japanese language. So it was really modest collection. But starting from that, I built that sort of collection. So if you're starting to work from small collections, then this can be a wonderful model. Like when you are developing your own collection, you may think about some characters give to your collection, and searching for opportunity to give some characters in your collection. I mean, of course, you can talk with faculty, and if some subject field is very strong, that could be the emphasis. But anyway, so that's what I did for my Japanese studies collection. And so I was supposed to talk about collection development, and the things we have to consider about collection development. One factor is environment, and unfortunately, we are very fluid environment. Economically, it's like a Toyota's logo, but just in case to just in time. And even library is the same situation. Like we used to buy things just in case, but now it's more geared towards just in time. And even Library Congress long time ago gave up there is no self-sufficient collection. It's just not feasible and not realistic. And we have to think about in the scope that we run, as I borrowed this one from Borrow Direct, and also library cooperation. Like we have a lot of consortial effort, regional and national. Those things need to be keep in your mind. Also, part of your collection, for example, like multi-volume set project of ACC, could be your collection as well as national collection. So think only about your collection or your library is not enough anymore. And another factor which is fluid and challenging is electronic information. Since started from the 1980s, and so that any collection today is a hybrid collection. It's also like a car, but it's a hybrid collection, and a mix of analog and digital resources. And building a hybrid collection that provide the breadth and depth of content appropriate for your local needs. That's the sort of main sort of practice of collection development. And collection development also need to be seen in the context of collection management. It's a part of collection management. And collection management, this is Charles Osborne's definition. Collection development is a part of a collection management that primarily deals with decisions about acquisition of materials, but also includes community liaison and outreach, policy development, selecting materials for acquisition and access, managing budget, collection evaluation, reading, storage, and preservation, and cooperative collection development activities, soliciting funding to supplement allocated collection development funds. Those are all collection management, part of collection management. And now come to the developing collections. A term representing the process of systematically building library collections to serve study, teaching, research, recreational, and other need of library users. This is Michael Gabriel's definition of developing collections. And I think this is particularly for like academic libraries, this is still true. And the process include selection, deselection, or weeding, planning strategies for acquisition, and evaluation of collections. This is a cycle, like you select, deselect, and planning strategies for acquisition, then when collection accumulated, you will evaluate and go back to the selection again. So it's a sort of cyclical. And this is a long quotation, but all selection decisions begins with consideration of the user community, current and potential, and the long-term mission, goals, and priorities of the library and its parent body, like university, and the tenet of intellectual freedom and respect for diverse point of view. So you can't collect one view. You have to collect wide view, like pro and cons for certain things. So that's basically library's collection. And to assessing the need of users and potential users, you have to have liaison activity and outreach activities. And for example, faculty members from faculty to know department programs, the research interest of faculty members, the direction in which they are moving into, and also like faculty, like syllabi, all these books are quoted in the syllabi is also important. We should have those items on the syllabi, and probably if you have reserve staff, maybe reserve staff will ask you to buy things which are not on the list. So the syllabi is very important. And also what dissertation and thesis students are working on, because particularly for PhD dissertation, university is supposed to support their dissertation. Well, not necessarily master thesis, but PhD dissertation, definitely we have to support. And also, we have to be sensitive about changing nature of scholarly communication and listen trend in Japanese studies and Japanese publications, and national, regional, and local cooperative collection development and resource sharing, and of course, budget. And collection development policies, ultimate goal of to write a collection development policy to assist in making selection decisions. Every library ought to have a careful, thought-out collection development policy. This act as a blueprint, explain the dimension and limit of the collection being developed. Your library may have a specific this is format, sorry, not format for the policy. And actually, I was thinking to insert in your workbook collection development policy, but I have a very skimpy, not well-developed policy, so I didn't put it. But Columbia has a special format, and we have to follow for that, and very broadly defined. But collection development policy is important, particularly when you started to work, many people call you and try to donate books. Like certain things are not for your collection development policy, then you can tell like, well, I'm sorry, but we really appreciate your consideration to give it to us, but our collection policy does not collect this type of book or that sort of thing. So you can use as a sort of a board to reject. And there's a policy, then you can say that. So that's one of the things like you could think about collection policy. But probably if you search Google, probably there are many good collection policies for Japanese studies. So please refer to those. Then actually selecting materials. This is also quoting from Peggy Johnson. Ideally, a subject specialist will be familiar with specialized terminology, understand the basic concept and the importance of the field, be aware of current controversies, recognize the name of prominent scholars and authors, know of historical milestones and names associated with them, and understand how the field relates to other fields and disciplines. Well, this is ideally, yes. And so keep those wording in your mind. And also you have to think about understanding the options and make informed decision. The type of, then once you've selected, you will order. And there are a number of types of orders. One is firm orders and standing orders, approval plans, blanket orders. Those, the approval plans and blanket orders supposed to freeing selectors to concentrate on identifying and obtaining more esoteric resources. Any library who is using approval plans? If you have approval plan, okay. I never went through approval plan for my Japanese. I was still picking one title by title. But certainly if you find a very good vendor which provides you a good sort of material, then it's really worth to use it. And but to do that, you have to create a profile, which is very, very important. And so although you're saving your time, but initially you have to invest some time to prepare for those approval plans. Then come to the managing budget. Word budget is used in two ways, as you know, like a total amount of fund available to meet the library's expenditure over a fixed period of time. The budget will vary from year to year, and also in Japanese case, because of exchange rate, like budget may be increased, but actual spending power may be decreased. So you have to really watch out exchange rate. And in the planning sense, the library's budget is its plan for the use of money available during the fiscal year and reflect allocations, expected revenues, and projected expenditures. And planning general parameter for expenditure. There are A and B, and A is planning for general parameters for expenditures. In academic libraries, curriculum is prime importance. Collections shall be sufficient size and scope to support the university's total instructional need and facilitate the university's research programs. The responsibility for selection should be placed in the hand of librarians with good subject background. Recommendations by the teaching staff should be actively encouraged. Powerful faculty members, this is a note, powerful faculty members may be very demanding where their own interests are concerned. And then your spending budget is lopsided. But some years, certain field has really good publication, but not much for another subject field. So those are all relative things, but anyway, this is one of the caution. And well, this is sort of a general sort of allocation, having retained 25% or 30% of its collection budget for general need. The remainder, according to a formula that weight such factors as departmental enrollment, course offerings, present state of collection, and cost and volumes of publication in the field. The two most important considerations are collection use and cost of materials. To maintain the library's budgetary flexibility, this enables special projects such as large purchases that serve several programs. And sometimes, like when we accept one PhD student for next year, sometimes students send email to the librarian that I need this material. And one time I encountered it's almost half of my budget. I was like, oh. And so I really need to talk with the much higher collection development librarian and ask her that we requested this item. and I don't have that kind of budget. And so she said, wait until the end of the fiscal year. If I have money, I will give it to you or something like that. And I always prepare certain expensive materials which I couldn't buy, just in case end of the fiscal year, the assistant director may have some money left and need to spend very quickly. Then I could say, I have this material. So I was well known. Whenever there's an extra budget, give it to Sachie. She can use very, very quickly. And that's very true even today. So in that way, you can expand your budget, because your budget is always limited and not enough to purchase everything you wanted to buy for the library. But just in case there is extra money, you can suck it, and which is beneficial for Japanese studies. And then another plan B is dividing the total budget based on type of library materials, like monographs, serials, electronic resources, database access, that sort of type of material. Another division is by language, Japanese language as Western languages, actually, HTTPS. And my case is I'm in charge only Japanese materials. Columbia has a librarian who are in charge of Western language materials for East Asian Library. So and also my previous institution, I wasn't assigned to buy Western language materials. So we have to heavily depend on subject bibliographer of main library, which was not bad, but at the same time you have to really watch out what's going on in the Western publication. And if subject bibliographer didn't buy that material, then you recommend them to purchase that material. So although I only purchase Japanese, but also keep my eyes on Western language materials as well, because mainly our students are, say, Americans or Canadians. So Western language publications are very, very important. And also, you can divide by subject areas, and also including the consideration of numbers of faculty and students in that subject area. For example, like humanities and social sciences. And, all these small subjects underneath of humanities and social sciences. And I didn't mention about science, but science history quite often hold in the hand of us. And also, like Columbia has a law library, and law library purchase all these after Meiji or the current law library materials, but not historical law materials so those things I purchase. So it's really watch out what other libraries are doing, and if your library has different entity who are dealing with Japan. And also you can divide by budget line, like hard money and soft fund. The hard money you really have to spend most of the time. Sometimes soft fund you can carry over to the next year. So if there's such differences and no need to spend fund within the year, then you can have to spend fund first, and then more lenient fund you can use later or something like that. Because if you spend all of them at once, then you have problem at the end of the year. So you have to think about what is the fiscal end of those budget. And of course, I mean, everybody probably doing this division by combination of all these factors. Like to me, bottom line is no formula to date are very satisfactory. Hence, if formulas are used, they should be treated as general guideline only. I mean, you have to sense your community and also the year you are working on. And once you have started to work on your budget, you have some sense and also instinction. This is the time to buy, or we have to wait, and things. And also prepare for like expensive items, and if it's not immediate need, but the faculty eventually need or something like that, then you could apply for outside funding, such as NCC's Maritime set and things. So you have to constantly prepare for your budget. And of course, most of the library may be using local system, and most of the local system has what's sometimes called total library system or the integrated library system. And most of the system has allowing various form of budget control and automatic claiming. And automatic claiming, probably you better set and claiming so that you don't need to check one by one. But my experience about total library system is not flexible enough to really know your budget, and also you have to request SAS report for your particular need. So my case is I'm still putting everything in my Excel file so that you can change whatever you need. And well, it's time consuming, but I like Excel, so it's a fun for me. So it's not a big deal for me. But if you are dealing with a number of, say, budget line and things, Excel may be much more flexible than the total library system. And well, that's what I am doing. Like, of course, we are using total library system. At the same time, I'm certain portions still using manual. Maybe not function, but factors to considering in monitoring ordering system include importance of understanding financial statement, whether you should pay in yen or in US dollars, or whether you want to prepay or not to prepay. The ramification of negative spending, like sometimes your budget line came in red, that means you overspent, so you have to do something. And also, like, you cancel or use some other funding and that sort of thing. And also shipping cost to be paid from your budget or from central budget. That makes big difference. And based on my experience, like, shipping cost is about 5% of my total group budget. And so 5% in a big budget is a big money. So you really find out whether you need to pay from your budget or from central budget. And once the collection budget is allocated, it must be spent, like any budget. Like if you don't spend, like next year your budget may be the same amount as previous year, so you have to spend. So you have to constantly think about completely spend your budget. And set target for expenditures and income balance during and at the end of fiscal year. So you constantly think, but particularly the end of the fiscal year, as I said, AD may have some extra budget, then you could use her budget for your purpose and things. And it's already mentioned, but the carrying forward of unexpended fund by the end of the fiscal year may not be allowed. Sometimes you have to pay actually, but that was the case in Pittsburgh. But in Columbia, you are committed, then you can carry over that amount to the next fiscal year. So it's really depend on the library, so you have to be aware of that, what is allowed in your library, so that you can sort of maximize your budget. And this is not easy, so maybe the handout may be easy to see, but this is outline of the book trade and publisher publishes, and it will go to the distributor, which is Tolsington, then go to the book trade companies like bookstores, then from bookstores to the libraries, and then from libraries go to the users. But those publisher, distributor, sometimes mother functions, like the Totsugi is sort of wholesale, and the book trade company, like bookstore, is retail, but some companies do mother function, like Maruzen is a publisher and also bookstore. Kinokuniya is the same. And but anyway, so it's not really clear cut, but sometimes matter functions. And there are also trade organizations for Book Publishers Association, and which has a website for searching for books. And also there's a which is for Distributors Association, and 日本書店商業組合連合会 which is bookstores trade organization. And there, so these are the process. So once you order, but it takes some time before you receive even invoice. The reason is because this is a mechanism. You have to, from bookstores, go to the Toritsugi, and Toritsugi go to the publisher. So, but of course we really wanted to have as quick as possible. So you have to watch out your vendors whether they will supply you materials relatively quickly or takes long time. Then you have to think about either complain or change the vendors. And of course, I mean, if books which are not necessarily need to get as soon as possible, then you can use slow vendors and things. I complained a lot to the vendors, like you're so slow, like it takes two months to get the books, or some vendors gave invoice within a week or something like that. So it's not everybody is making their business in the same, so you have to really pay attention what your vendors are doing. Then I will talk about this acquisition tools. For current publication, I think the most comprehensive one is Zenkoku Shoshi, and it used to be came in monthly printer publication, but that's no longer available, and it became online only. And you can the beauty of Zenkoku Shoshi is National Libraries is a no-honsei, I mean the depository library, so they receive technically everything published in Japan. That's not really true, but technically it's supposed to collect everything published in Japan, and particularly useful for those lay literature, particularly government publication. Government publication tends to be stagiously published, and at the end result is probably sometimes sold became as a government document, but in the process, and some of them are not really published for trade. So those stagious things may be included in Zenkoku Shoshi, and there's no good tools to find those gray literature. So Zenkoku Shoshi may be one of the best resources to use for the selection. And also, National Library developed a number of tools. One is, of course, National Library OPAC. It has a long address, but if you go to the NDL's website, you can very quickly find this OPAC now. And it was hidden somewhere for a while, but now it's up, so relatively easy to find. And OPAC is good for something you know, but something you don't know is not so easy. So Zenkoku Shoshi may be still useful tool for selections. And also there's the NDL search. Mainly this is public services and not for selection, because it's like a discovery type of database, so it provides you a variety of materials. But for selection, I'm not sure how much this is useful. But anyway, if you can find an effective way to use it, it may be useful for you. And in addition to NDL's tools, there's a Shippan News, which is for publication for trade. And Shippan News is coming every 10 days, except certain months. And I used to use this one, but recently the character became so small, and when I put them on the side, and to input computer is not very easy. I complained a number of times, but they didn't change the attitude, so I'm not using it.
I have the same problem.
It's because it's very tiny character, and another thing is those printed things, like when I ask my assistant to order, they can't copy and paste. So that's another reason why I didn't use those printed tools anymore, because electronic tools, staff can copy and paste, particularly if there is an ISBN, they can copy and use it. So that's really saved their time. So, well, the Shuppan News is still, and also Shuppan News has a news, I mean, not just only list of the publications. So in the sense that we are supposed to know the Japanese publication environment, for that purpose, Shuppan News is still very, very useful. And Shuppan Renkan has a 1-year accumulation of sort of Shuppan News, so the yearly sort of a book publishing trend and things are mentioned in Shuppan Renkan. So from that point of view, Shuppan Renkan is also important. But selection tools, it's 1 year behind. It's already published, so it's not current. Shuppan News is more current. And I'd like to mention about NII tools. NII is National Institute of Informatics. It used to be NAXIS. And NII, like National Library, developed a lot of things. And WebCat, NAXIS WebCat will become CNI books, and from April 1st. And I mentioned about WebCat Plus. The reason is because it's a relational database. So particularly when you wanted to sort of enhance your certain subject field, this may be a very, very useful tool because it's all related terms are appeared on the right-hand side. So you can pick up those words and expand what you are looking for. So if you need to enhance, for example, say, Bunkajin Ruigaku or something, anthropology or something like that, then you could use this one and expand to select your books, not necessarily current in the past publication. And the Sachie books, NAXIS WebCat, I used to use, because this one has for series, it's an umbrella record, and underneath there's items which belongs to that series. And most of the databases, National Libraries, OPAC or OCLC, sometimes it gives umbrella record, but no umbrella record, just item by item, which is sometimes missing some of the issues in the series. So to check whether we have everything on that series, if that series is important, I quite often use WebCat, but I don't know the CNI books. And last time I checked, it's still useful for this umbrella record. But anyway, this is NII tools, I think. It's also important. And the last one is books, ORJP. It used to be Hon Sagasu, but that title is disappeared, current web page, and it said books ORJP. And this is sort of a books in print in Japanese version. So it's supposed to list all the books which are still available from market are in that database. Sometimes that's not true. It's appeared in there, but sold out from the publisher. But this is a sort of a Japanese books print. And it will give ISBN and price with tax and without tax. And so I also use this one quite often to confirm like certain things. Columbia is in New York, and the interesting part is satellite edition of the newspaper comes on the same, actually previous day to my desk. So I look at all this, the Japanese newspaper has an advertisement of all these publications, but quite often does not give me any ISBN. So I search for this one and get ISBN and things. And also, some publisher input their publication very quickly to this books ORJP, but some not. In that sense, in that case, I found Google search is much more effective to find a new publication. It just came from their oven. It's not in anywhere, but if you search for Google, it appears. And I complained about this advertisement in newspaper. There is no ISBN, and some publishers started to put ISBN recently. So complaining sometimes works. And okay, Booktown Jimbo is the Jimbocho is well known for the Booktown, and there's a 167 or so bookstores, and out of those 52 are used bookstores. But Booktown Jimbo also have search engine for kind publication and also used publications. But anyway, so Booktown Jimbo is Kanda's Jimbocho's bookstores website. And also Japan Foundation sent us Japanese book news. It also electronically available, and the good part is this one has a review of the book. But it's not necessary for the academic libraries, because but still, like sometimes from the title you can't really judge whether this is good book for your library or not. But book review helps. So I put this on. Also, it came from sent by Japan Foundation, so you don't need to make effort to get it. And about the government document, I already talked about a little bit, but there's a Kampo and Kampo Kofu. And used to be a safe Kampo Geppo, like this size of publication, but no more, and it's website. But safe Kampo Geppo is useful for really general materials, but detailed things, this is not enough. So that's why I at the beginning said Zenkoku Shoshi, because Zenkoku Shoshi include much more than safe Kampo Geppo. And your dealers also send your catalogs list and things, and also dealers also provide website. And this is what I noticed. For example, Gannando Boeki Excel file. It's called New Edition News, and Isedo using Word or PDF file. Normally it's PDF file, and PDF file is difficult to copy and paste. So I asked Word version, and they sent me Word version, so just in case. Came in email attachment. Most of them came as email attachment. And JPT also Excel file, and JPT's useful part is including exhibition catalog. Be careful because it's a spreadsheet, and so there is a tab, like first tab is only books. The second tab, the bottom is exhibition catalogs. My assistant didn't realize this. There is another tab, so he ordered only the first page and left all these second and third pages. So, but anyway, so particularly exhibition catalog is difficult to get it. If JPT can provide, it's much easier to get it. And this came in their Excel file, something called book news, JPT book news. And now JPT also distribute JPT DVD news, which is also useful. And Kinokuniya is an email called Kino News, and it's email, so it's still useful to copy and paste. So I use this one too. And dealers like Maruzen and Kinokuniya has their own website, and it has an order function. Like our case is almost never use this order function because we have to go through the system and get the PO number and things. So it's not easy for us to use this one. But if, say, the scholar like to know where to buy this book, and then you can recommend Amazon or Kinokuniya. Most of the scholars probably use Amazon.com, but I'm strong against Amazon. The reason is because I don't want to be monopolized by one company. I like to have variety of things. Otherwise, at the end, we have to follow whatever the Amazon offered and not what we want. So, not fighting with Amazon, but but because it's always like a faculty said, "Oh, I already ordered to Amazon," and I see some other, not necessarily bookstores, but some other industries, because something becomes so strong, that's only the option they can get things. So I don't want books to happen in that way. So I like a variety, and so use some other companies like Amazon, Kinokuniya, and some other things. But quite frankly, Amazon has a lot of information. And dealers also routinely send publications, catalogs, flyers, and book announcements from various sources on their customers. Sometimes inside of your order, when order comes in the box, and sometimes it separately sends you in the envelope. And the distributor also have their own sort of catalogs, Shukan Nippan Soto and Shinkan Toshomoku, which is one is Nippan and the other one is Tohan. I don't use these things, so I rejected to receiving this. But some people may use it. But the reason I'm not using is those are book for trade, so it's not enough for the library because we have to buy a little bit different type of materials. And but anyway, so there's distributors' catalogs, and publishers also have their own catalog. Like these are just examples, but Fuji Shuppan Soho Toshomoku, Bozokan Toshomoku, Yoshikawa Kobunkan Shuppan Toshomoku. Like I have a stock of rows and rows of these publishers' catalogs in my office. Sometimes to see entirely what they're having, it's a publisher's catalog is quite important. And Yoshikawa Kobunkan is sort of the publisher for the historical material for history. So I have to go through it, not miss anything important publication. And Hozokan is of course Buddhism, and Columbia is strongly in Buddhism collection, so I can't ignore it. So I will most of the time go through entire catalog. And also, publisher has their own sort of serial publication. Like in the case of University of Tokyo Press, it's UP, and Iwanami Shoten has Tosho, and Chikuma Shogo has Chikuma, and although those publishers' serial publication is useful because it's discussing about their publication, and also some small news and something not necessarily related to their own publication, like it's an independent sort of articles. Like Tosho used to have Wahon Kyoshitsu, which is Nakano Mitsuo Sensei was writing, and we which attended to Tenri workshop. All so I make a copy and distribute it to everybody, so everybody can read it, and it eventually become books. But those why I mentioned is publishers' serial publication is quite useful to know about the book, and also trade book publication environment. We're supposed to know those things. So. And also publishers' announcement and flyers. And as I said, I really like newspaper advertisement and also like most of the newspaper has a book review part, like in the case of Asahi Shimbun in Sunday. So a lot of books which before I read these newspapers book review, I didn't purchase because from the title, I didn't realize this is related to Japanese studies. But when you read a little bit more details, you could decide whether you will buy that book or not for your library. And book reviews and advertisement in scholarly journals. For example, Nihon Rekishi, this is published by Yoshikawa Kobunkan, has like this is article called Shokyou to Shokai and Zashi Ronbun Mokroku and Sunkan Shinpyo. And then, because it's published by Yoshikawa Kobunkan, at the end of journal, there's a long list of advertisements from Yoshikawa Kobunkan's publication. And so probably some other, for example, Japanese literature, they have similar things, but this is the most extensive sort of book-related information in one sort of journal, academic journal. And grey literature. Anyone knows what is grey literature? Probably Honsuke-san knows.
It's not commercially published. It's like your own publication or something.
Yeah, I thought about it's between real publication and internal sort of documentation. Sometimes international documentation is also called grey literature. And there's certain period, grey literature was a big issue between the United States and Japan. So the document supply center was established in LC, which does not exist anymore. But for not for humanities, but for social science and other fields, grey literature is quite important. And so if you have faculty who are really following new policies and things, the grey literature becomes very, probably your field too, like law field too, I guess. So, but to tap this one is not very easy. When I was still in Japan and working for a certain institution, I read newspaper and picking up whatever the government office announced, and I called office and do you have any publication? And because the institution was in Tokyo, so I went and collected all these things. But that's not possible for us outside of Japan. But as I mentioned, Zenkoku Shoshi is supposed to be listed, whatever a national library get. So you may check those things if you have faculty or graduate students who are doing that sort of research. And one of the pleasure for me to read this Kogetsu Toshokan Geppo was Honya ni Naihon. And they talked about, well, sometimes that book is also in the bookstore, but its title is Honya ni Naihon. And this is supposed to be sort of grey literature. Grey literature also includes like exhibition catalog is part of the sort of grey literature too, but like a lot of individual institutions publish, but not for sale. I mean, it's just on internal publication. For example, like Sachie is probably one of those categories. And so Honya ni Naihon include those books. And so when you find those books, you will write a letter to that institution or the publisher and said, well, we are interested in this book. Is it possible to donate? One of the things it's someone's mentioning about sending letter and success rate is very low. One of the things is to send overseas is difficult for Japanese institutions. So if you can ask, if you can use your corporate UPS account and give that account, that success rate is becomes quite high. And also, like in Columbia's case, is ask JPT to receive those things and send it to us. So internally send from one institution to JPT seems not very difficult. So of course we have to pay a service charge and internal inland shipping cost. But if you really need to have that publication, which is not for trade, that's one of the way to get it. Right? So I quite often use Columbia's UPS account, so that, or the FedEx account, so that they can use that account, and the receiving side will pay for the shipment. But it's quite expensive, so not all the small books, but the important books only. I use that account. And then there is a catalog by subject. Bukkyo Sogo Mokuro Kankokai. This is all these publishers which are dealing with Buddhist materials website. And then I found on my shelf that like Engeki Eiga, Tosho Somokuroku, Josei Mondai Somokuroku, all these kind of mokuroku. And also Iseido published their own subject-based catalog too. And if you are really searching for books on that particular subject, those are very useful. But those are compiled by, I think it's Tohan, so it's mostly trade books, not grade literature or minor publications, so you have to pay attention about that. And of course, films, manga becomes very, and also animation becomes very important. But until recently, I didn't really collect those things systematically. And Ito-san, yeah, over there. So I asked Ito-san for her rescue, and so she compiled a wonderful list of all these tools she's using. So please refer to Ito-san's, it's inside of your handout, the workbook. So I didn't make any PowerPoint, and she really described extensive tools and her experience. So, and also it's interesting to read how one librarian works on the subject, what she's tackling with. So I highly recommend you to go through that one. And this comic is not related to book reviews, but I like this cartoon, so I put it here. But as I already mentioned, book reviews are most of the newspapers, and these are also searchable in websites, so you may search it. This is old cartoons. I don't know when I get this one, but I still like it. And when I asked my staff to make a JPEG, so the staff was saying, maybe we should put this one on our circulation desk. So well, it said, I'm not kidding around anymore. Mrs. Whitman, you have our book, we have your son. That's what it said. So, and well, one of our staff also pointed out, librarians doesn't have banned the hairstyle, this hairstyle anymore, or something like that. But anyway. I have a space, so I like to put something, and so you can enjoy a little bit. Because what I'm talking is mostly not very interesting or funny. So then, in addition to current books, sometimes you have to buy used books because in the past we missed to purchase, or like faculty need, and also used books sometimes accept certain time materials. Used bookstores is cheaper than the current ones, but I used used bookstores whenever I encounter we have to buy out of print books, and to search for, primarily I use Nihon Fuhonya, and the beauty of Nihon Fuhonya is because it's Nihon Fuhonya, it covers entire Japan, even in Okinawa, and of course the major city is more expensive than smaller cities, like like in Tokyo it was 100,000 yen, but in Nagoya's bookstore it was 80,000 yen or something like that. The 20,000 yen difference is a big difference. Even we pay inland shipment, it's still cheaper to buy from local bookstores. And the problem is probably now probably Honfuruhoya allowed to use credit cards, so probably you can order it. And in the past that wasn't the case, and the Columbia finally allowed us to use a corporate credit card. I never used it, and I can't use it, so I have to ask our main library. But Nihon Furuhoya now allowed to use a credit card, like National Library allowed to use credit card too. So it's getting to be, using credit card getting to be normal. And of course I mentioned about Booktown Jimbo, and this is 52 used bookstores database. And sometimes Nihon Furuhonya and Booktown Jimbo is overlapped, but sometimes not. So when you are really seriously looking for and you couldn't find one, you have to find search also the other one too. And of course, Amazon also have used books, but Amazon seems like not directly Amazon, but participating used bookstores is putting those items. So you have to go back to the participating bookstores. And I never really tried, but probably small bookstores did not want to deal with foreign institutions. So you have to think about that factor as well. And also, some of the Amazon's offer is quite expensive, outrageously expensive, so you have to watch out. That's not the reason I against the Amazon. I against the monopoly. And for individual catalogs, for used books like Isedo, what I receive is number of places send us catalogs. But for example, like Isedo Koshomokrok, and Kobayashi Shobo is well known for religious materials, and also some Kotenseki as well, and Kobayashi Shobo, and from Kyoto, like Shibunkaku or Rinparo, or those bookstores send us some catalogs. But and also quite often those used books, but in terms of used books, it's not really correct, like Kotenseki, which is maybe used, but it's a different category of books, and Isedo quite often has those Kotenseki, and Kobayashi Shobo as well, and also like Shibunkaku and all these things also have those Kotenseki as well. And also there's a special journal called Nihon Kosho Tsushin, which has an advertisement at the end of the journal, and also discussion about all these old books in Nihon Kosho Tsushin. And if you have time, if you're sitting at the reference desk and do nothing, then it's a good reading. Okay, and the last one is vendors and dealers. And I compiled book dealers in Japan, book dealers in the United States, and used bookstores. These are all selected ones, not no intention to be comprehensive. And it's in your handout, workbook, and except grading window, each one is updated by those vendors themselves, so that it's the most current information. And one of the things, maybe no need, but vendors and dealers, when I was coming to this stage, I was from time to time think about this work ethics. For example, like a vendor want to take you for dinner or something like that, whether I should accept those things or not, and things. But anyway, work ethics I found in the books is librarians' ethical obligations are twofold: to conduct business with mutual respect and trust, and to serve their own organization as best they can. And another one is working with suppliers and vendors. Librarians should keep the financial and service interest of their libraries foremost, seeking to obtain the maximum value for each purchase, license agreement, and service contract. So not because they gave me dinner, so I will order this publisher or anything like that. So you should think about your institution first and your users' need first. Do I have time to read these? How is the time? Is that okay? seems like I've stopped, so I will talk a little bit about e-resources. This is general, not necessarily in Japanese. Unfortunately or fortunately, Japanese books or journals hasn't developed e-books and e-resources as much as other languages. Like we are really, Japan is really behind our counterpart, Chinese or Koreans. And so I don't really have experience with purchasing e-books and things, because most of the e-books for Japanese studies is in Western languages. And we have books in Japan knowledge, if you consider that as e-books, but that's as much as we have. And net library, I was thinking to buy one item from net library, then it's moved from OCLC to EBSCO. And when EBSCO representative came to Colombia, he said, "What you're talking about?" About this Kinokuniya's item. So I said, "Oh," and so I missed the opportunity to. Now it seems like EBSCO has one person who is that Japanese last name, so maybe business may go smooth. But I haven't dealt with this one yet. Another reason is because most of the North American library, major library, has now access to HathiTrust record, and it includes a lot of old materials. And the particular item I wanted to buy is Meiji Bunka Sosho. Columbia doesn't have entire volume, so I thought, well, this is a good one to purchase from net library. But now I missed the opportunity to buy. Then I have to check HathiTrust record too. So they may include those items. Then I don't necessarily need to buy net library. So multi-factors we have to think about, particularly HathiTrust. Like whenever they copyright is expires, they will eventually release for use. So that's why I said it's a fluid environment, and the situation changed so much. Vicky talked about this 2010 workshop. From that day, our environment is quite different, and factors you have to take into consideration is really, really multiple, and not just only type of books, type of materials, but also like all these, where we can get all these things, that not just only purchasing, but cooperative things, and also HathiTrust type of things. So, this time is okay?
Yeah, time is fine.
Okay. So, we are, time in a sense, transitional. I don't think really e-books are very stable market yet, and still need more years to be settled down, more sort of a stable environment. And this is mainly that from her book, Johnson's book, but the digital electronic environment, challenges presented by digital e-resources and the internet are quite something. And say price structure, and cooperative selection and purchasing, and most of the things like probably you purchase through the now or something like that cooperative venture, and the users' unrealistic expectation, like you really like, and users demanding to get it their own time, not library's time. And quite often, because this is a technology-based, so Columbia, for example, pay the price, but sometimes that book is not available for some technical reasons. Then, like, I sit on the virtual reference, so which is not necessarily Japanese, and all kinds of reference question will come. One of the frequent questions is, ebook doesn't open, or ebook doesn't allow to download, or something like that. And another thing I encountered is very contradicting thing is like e-journals. The journals, what we taught in the library school is currency is most important. But when I say someone's asking me some e-journals, and the most current one is not available. There is the time lag. Of course, the JSTOR is well known for 5 years timeline, but it's a different story. But for these e-journals, 1 year time. Then what is the purpose of the subscribing this journal? I mean, currency is 1 year behind, and then really, I mean, it's really defeat the purpose of subscribing journals. So e-resources has a lot of problems, and so it takes some time before it's really dust is settled down. And of course, users and those users are digital born, not like us. So they are so familiar with digital things, but at the same time, if these things are not available, they are really mad and not very patient. And most of the things seems ebooks seems purchased through packaging and aggregating rather than picking up one by one, title by title. And so all this packaging, aggregating those scholarly contents, and sometimes I wonder, like, there's a lot of books which are not necessarily our interest. But I like to go back. This cartoon is really a classic, but I thought this is one of the problems. We don't see virtual reference. We don't see the users, and so it could be a dog. And I remember when I had a cat, when I'm working really concentrated, she needs my attention. So she walked through on my keyboard. So that could be a different question. Anyway, advantages and potential benefits. Ease of searching and powerful research and retrieval capabilities. Remote access to resources from outside a single physical library. Consolidation of many volumes and years into one searchable file. Inclusion of video and sound. Reduction in theft and mutilation. Probably you learned in the library school there's mutilation, and I didn't know that, but one day I was intensively using business library. There's a lot of pages are teared off, so that page was not available. So from that point of view, like, the electronic resources may be useful. And the content, including formulae and graphics that can be extracted and manipulated, used by several people simultaneously, and easy export of information to a personal database, reduced cost for binding, storage, and staff maintenance. That's probably a major reason why universities switched from print to e-journals. And hyperlinks, which move beyond linearity of print within documents and link citation with full-text document, and access outside the library's normal hours of service. This is probably important also for libraries' point of view. And the e-resources challenge, in addition to cats and dogs, technical issues, and cost for equipment, because you have to have equipment, and also entire sort of IT environment. Conduit is small, then it's not easy to, takes time to get pages on your screen, and equity of access, and copyright, security, bureaucratic control, indexing, archiving, licensing, user instruction. And the internet also have problem, question of authority, quality, accuracy, instability, and mutability, and mobility of information. And those are challenges of e-resources. And this is as much as I prepared. Thank you. And this is also my favorite comics. So. Of course, Piglet is me. Do you have any questions? If I can answer. Yeah.
Thank you for the presentation. I was struck by something that you said, which is using the collection policy that you developed to analyze a gift. And I find I have two policies. My policy for buying and my policy for accepting a gift. For example, I would never buy...
Policy?
It's not written. It's my unwritten set of rules. But I wonder what you think of that. So if someone's giving me Japanese translations of famous Western philosophers, especially if they're very difficult to read in English, and it's something that faculty members are probably teaching, I'm very happy to accept them. But I would never buy it. I would actually never spend my budget being limited, I would never spend it on that. Do you think there's a problem in that, or should we consider gifts somewhat separately from the collection policy that we
That's
outline?
exactly my unwritten policy too. Like, if I don't need to spend money, and it's not really outlier of my collection, I will get it. For example, like say Mark Twain. I mean, it's not the Japanese literature. Normally we don't purchase. But for me, one of the purposes is recreational. So if someone gave it to the university, this is major literature in the world, so I will accept it. And and another thing is, for example, like whether you will do, if you are graduate, like alumni published books in Japanese, which is not necessarily Japanese studies, whether you will collect those books like or not. And I'm asking around my colleagues, and they say, well, we will collect all these alumni books and things. So I twist my policy in the sense and accept. So it's depend on, but what I said was like, well, like my neighbor passed away and he has some Japanese books, so I'd like to give it to your institution. And most of the, well, like our statistics, about 50-60% of those donations are duplicate. And but in polite way, how could we reject those offers? I use a collection policy, and actually, this is not my unwritten policy, but we are told we are not accepting any unsolicited donation anymore. And also, processing donation takes time, so unless it's useful for you.
Yeah, it's not really free.
No,
No,
it's never
not
free,
free at
right?
all.
Yeah, you have to send the duplicate
And it takes
and the
space.
catalog. It's not really.
And it's not easy to get rid of.
Right.
Duplicates.
That's
It's very
I wish we could make an easier system for getting our duplicates somehow to, say, smaller libraries that could use them. We tend to send to just a local library sale. I accept gifts. I have a student sort them into what we have and what we don't have. I analyze what we don't have, if it's good for the collection. The rest we send to a local
Well,
library
Ithaca
sale.
has one of the world's best
Well,
libraries.
but we're lucky that way too. But I had a really interesting story too that I want to share with you. I over the space of a couple of years, I had all these gifts of New Age books in Japanese. And we don't need this for the collection. We don't need this for the collection. You know, complete, heal yourself and astrology, and I've been putting them aside and sending them to the library sale. And then, sure enough, one of our professors says, well, I'm really interested in exploring publications now on New Age topics. So it can be tricky. You never know what kind of material down the road is going to be someone's research meat.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, to buy is relatively easy, but to process those gifts are more difficult. But one of the things I do is whenever the faculty passed away and they try to donate the books to us, I will accept. The reason is because quite often our books are in there. And also, faculty get a lot of books from their students. So the things I didn't know about, say, because I'm working in Columbia, that someone wrote about Columbia, but of course it's not our radar, so I don't know those books. So those are quite often come from faculty who passed away. And the faculty is getting old, and their children sort of pressing us to accept because they have to vacate the house and sell the house. And so it's very aggressive, and sometimes I can't really hold anymore and accepting those things. But as you said, we will keep those donated books until next book sale. And sometimes new field emerged from those unaccepted books. So you never know. And I really think you have to follow your instinction, like what will become next topics. But sometimes completely out of blue, like you are lucky to get those books ahead of time. But anyway, but when you are working relatively long time, you feel like you are like escargot, like dendenmushi, and your sensor becomes a little bit more sensitive, and you feel like maybe this could be a next topics and things. But anyway, donation has also challenges and benefit and challenges. Yeah.
Question about the Western language collection about the Japan. So you didn't cover today, but
those books.
Yes, to buy or to develop collection of Japan or about Japan. So I suppose to buy and develop Japanese collection in English and in Japanese, but so I can just do search and collection development for Japanese, written in Japanese by myself, but for English literature or English publications, I don't, our for instance, history subject librarians pay very little attention on Asia. So our collection of Japan in history is very sketchy, and then there was no maybe social science, very sketchy. So one of the faculty told me I should buy every English book published by University of Hawaii or Washington or whatever, everything I should buy. So I just found I really don't have time or expertise to search publications of Japan in English as well as in Japanese. So what should I train, or should I talk to history subject librarian and do science, social science and do literature?
You are working
very little money too.
Yeah, most of us have very little money. But do you mainly use the approval plan?
Yes.
Then ask them to include Japan in their profile. Okay. That's one of the things. And National Library compiles book on Japan, and which is on their website. There are all these books about Japan and in Western languages. Okay. So you may check those things and order, use as an ordering tool.
I see.
And the main part is tell them, like all these public librarians, Asia is getting big. Even Obama is scared about Asia, so you should put Asia books on Japan or China or East Asia on their book profile, so that it will come to your library.
Okay.
And even approval, sometimes approval has a sort of slip, or the book itself comes and selector will choose. Ask them to choose books on Japan too. And sometimes, like some librarian doesn't willing to pay for that, then you have to use your own budget. But that's at least they will get it for you. So you have to accept, I guess. But anyway, as a tool, I know is National Library's books on Japan, which is probably neutral, and try to get all these Western language material.